Republican presidential hopeful Mike Huckabee is not backing down, accusing President Obama of pushing the Jewish state toward another Holocaust. Last week, Huckabee said the Obama administration's nuclear deal with Iran is, quote, marching the Israelis to the door of the oven. Democrat leaders are blasting Huckabee for the comment, but the former Arkansas governor says the president is naive to trust the Iranians. The Islamic regime in Tehran has publicly vowed to wipe Israel off the map and calls for death to America. Huckabee is calling on Congress to reject the Iranian deal. It's been almost 5 years since the so-called Arab Spring, with political freedom protests, swept across the Middle East. Many around the world expected democratic reform, but saw chaos instead. CBN's Scott Ross asked expert Caroline Glick about trends in the Middle East and Israel.
Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, and yet, for decades, has been blamed for much of the trouble in the region. Now, oddly enough, Israel has remained strong while surrounded by enemies and chaos.
So one island of safety and tranquility and peace is Israel. The only country that's a coherent nation state, an organic nation state in this region is the Jewish state. Every other state you see either collapsing or on the verge of collapse and struggling in order to survive.
Born in Chicago, Caroline Glick immigrated to Israel at age 21, joined the IDF, became involved in politics, and at one time advised Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on foreign policy.
There's a misconception that this whole problem that we're seeing now exploding in our faces throughout these areas is somehow or another a function of the absence of a Palestinian state in the land of Israel.
Glick says that's not true. U.S. administrations have tried for decades to resolve the conflict by trying to force Israel to give up its biblical homeland in order to create a Palestinian state.
If you lay the blame for the absence of peace and stability in the Middle East on the Jewish state, then you have a way out. You don't have to confront any of the real difficulties that are inherent to the failed systems of governance that the Arabs have adopted for themselves over the past 100 years.
Glick says the real problem is that Israel's neighbors never accepted its existence.
Big picture. What's the grand theme in the Middle East these days?
The unraveling of the state system that was instituted here at the end of World War I by the British and the French.
Following World War I, the League of Nations carved up the Turkish Ottoman Empire. Over the years, those areas became states and gained independence, but were mostly ruled by kings or dictators.
All of these dynastic orders that were established by them to encompass states are being stressed, if not breaking. The whole concept of a balance of power between the Sunnis and the Shiites, all of this is going out the window.
Glick says the recent disintegration of regional regimes has led to power vacuums being filled by radical Islam.
You have spoilers coming in and taking advantage of the power vacuum, whether it's ISIS on the Sunni side or it's the Iranians on the Shiite side with Hezbollah as their strike force.
With them, all this infighting going on, isn't that an advantage for Israel?
Israel has to be much more wary. We have to be much more vigilant in protecting our borders, and I dare say we have to be much more vigilant in integrating our own Arab minority into our society for two reasons. One, because it's the right thing to do, and the second reason is because you see massive attempts by ISIS and other terrorist organizations, as well as the Iranian regime, to infiltrate and penetrate Israel's Arab population as well as the Palestinians for the purpose of them fomenting wars against us from inside.
What about the relationship between Israel and Iran?
I think Iran really is the principal danger. I mean, it's been argued that ISIS is far less dangerous than Iran because they're so brutal and they're so monstrous that they have far less ability to maintain themselves over time. On the other hand, Iran is a regime that has managed to survive the test of time since the revolution in 1979.
And now, some 35 years later, Iran has advanced weapon systems, is trying to go nuclear, and is using regional chaos to expand its empire. To make matters worse, U.S.-Israel relations are on rocky ground.
The United States has always been an ally of Israel, support of Israel. But recently, it seems there is a real stress on that relationship.
The Obama administration is changing sides, essentially, unfortunately, by siding with Iran against Israel, against the Sunnis. He has this idea, I assume, that he can rejigger the balance of power by removing the United States as the main influencer and controller of this region. But what we see is that that isn't true. There is no balance of power. What there is a nuclear arms race now ensuing because of America's nuclear policy towards Iran.
Despite the seeming Middle East meltdown, Glick says she has hope for the future.
There is strong support in the United States, different parts of the world, from the Christian world. Right. How important is that?
It's critical because I think that, strategic wisdom can stem from many sources, and the Bible is one of those sources.
Are you hopeful for the future, or do you feel like you're a voice crying in the wilderness?
I'm hopeful for the future because, like you, I believe in God, and I have faith not only in the God of Israel, but also in the people of Israel.
Praying for the peace of Jerusalem, do you think prayer makes a difference?
Of course it makes a difference.
Yeah.
I hope it does anyway, because I find myself praying even when I'm not thinking about it. So hope I'm not wasting all that energy, but I'm fairly certain that I'm not. Yeah. No, I think that prayer is extremely important.
Scott Ross, Jerusalem.